23 seconds. That's how long it took for my husband to destroy 6 years of marriage. I was pregnant with his twins when I signed those divorce papers, but he wouldn't let me speak. He cut me off 3 times. 3 times I tried to tell him about the babies growing inside me. By the time he found out the truth, I'd already exposed his lies to 12 million people online. His supermodel fiancée had left him at the altar, and his billion-dollar company was crumbling. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I say the truth is a weapon best wielded by the woman everyone underestimated. This is my story. They say you remember exactly where you were when your life changed forever. I remember the sound, not his words, the sound of the pen scratching across paper. 23 seconds. That's how long it took to sign away 6 years of marriage. I counted, because if I stopped counting, I'd start screaming. My name is Elena Hart, and 4 hours before I signed those divorce papers, I was standing in a clinic bathroom staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it into the toilet. After 2 miscarriages, after 2 years of doctors telling me my body just couldn't, after Jackson saying maybe we weren't meant to be parents, those 2 lines felt like a miracle and a death sentence at the same time. I wanted to call him immediately, tell him right then, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he'd been distant lately, the way he worked later and later, the way he looked through me instead of at me. So I waited. I'd tell him that night, face to face, and we'd figure it out together. I was so naive. At 11:47 that night, I stood in Jackson's office on the 52nd floor of Pierce Biotech Tower. The entire city of Chicago spread out below us, lights twinkling like stars, but I couldn't see any of it. All I could see was the man I loved sitting behind his desk, looking at his phone instead of me. His attorney, Mr. Graves, was a man in his 60s wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. He slid the papers across the glass desk with practiced efficiency. "Mrs. Pierce, if you'll just sign pages 4, 7, and 12, he said. I turned to Jackson. "Can we talk about this? Just the two of us?" Jackson didn't look up from his phone. "There's nothing to talk about, Elena. We both know this isn't working." My hand moved to my stomach instinctively, "But I need to tell you something important." He finally looked up, and the coldness in his eyes took my breath away. "Don't. Whatever you're about to say, don't. I've made my decision." "Jackson, please, this is really important. I need you to listen to me right now." "I don't care what you have to say, Elena. Just sign the papers." My throat closed up. 6 years of marriage, and he wouldn't even listen. I'd been trying to tell him for 30 seconds, and he'd cut me off 3 times. This was the man who was supposed to love me, supposed to protect me, and he couldn't spare 2 minutes to hear what I had to say. Mr. Graves cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mr. Pierce, perhaps you should give your wife a moment too. She signs tonight, or my lawyers file in the morning with contested grounds." Jackson interrupted. "Your choice, Elena." "Contested?" My voice came out as a whisper. "What grounds?" "Abandonment of marital duties. I'll cite the medical issues." The room tilted. He was threatening to publicly blame me for the miscarriages, to make my most painful moments part of a legal record that anyone could read, to humiliate me in a way I'd never recover from. Jackson's phone buzzed on the desk. A text message lit up the screen, and even from where I stood, I could see it. "Sienna, is it done yet?" "I'm waiting," followed by a red heart emoji. My hand holding the pen started to shake. He already had someone else. This wasn't about our marriage failing. This was about him moving on to someone new, someone who didn't come with baggage, someone who didn't remind him of failure. I signed. 3 pages. My tears smudged the ink on page 12. "That should be sufficient," Mr. Graves said quietly. "Mr. Pierce, you'll need to sign as well." Jackson was already walking toward the elevator. "I'll sign tomorrow. Email me the finals." "You're not even going to sign?" I whispered. His finger was already on the elevator button. "My lawyers will handle it. You can go." The elevator doors closed. I was alone with Mr. Graves, who was packing his briefcase, pretending he hadn't just witnessed something die. "Mrs. Pierce," he said quietly, "you should have a lawyer look at those papers before—" "It doesn't matter," I told him. "Nothing matters anymore." I made it to my car before I collapsed. My 2012 Honda Civic was parked in the visitor section now. Jackson had removed my name from the executive parking level 3 weeks ago. I should have known then. I sat in the driver's seat, forehead pressed against the steering wheel, and that's when the first cramp hit. Sharp, low, terrifying. No, no, no. Oh, no, no, please, I gasped, my hands flying to my abdomen. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands. Called Jackson. It went straight to voicemail. He'd blocked me. Already, before the ink was even dry. I tried again. Same result. Another cramp, worse this time, radiating through my entire body. I started the car and drove myself to the emergency room through rain that hammered the windshield like accusations. Alone, pregnant, divorced, terrified. I didn't know it then, but that signature I'd just given him wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of his nightmare. Because the pen that signed those papers had just signed away his rights to something he didn't even know existed. 2 weeks after that night, I sat in a coffee shop across from Harper Quinn, the attorney Mr. Graves had quietly recommended. She was 45, sharp-eyed, with the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting too many battles. She slid my divorce papers across the table, certain sections highlighted in yellow. "See this clause on page 7, she said, tapping the document. "Both parties waive all claims to biological children conceived prior to date of separation. It's standard language, but the timing is interesting." I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, trying to stop them from shaking. "I don't understand." "Elena," Harper's voice was gentle but firm. "Are you pregnant?" The question hung between us like smoke. I'd been to the emergency room twice in 2 weeks. Both times they'd told me the baby was fine. That with the cerclage procedure, my cervix could hold. That this pregnancy might actually work. But I hadn't told anyone, not my former colleagues, not the one friend I had from college who drifted away when I married Jackson. No one. 6 weeks, I whispered. Harper leaned back in her chair. "Did anyone witness Jackson refusing to hear you that night?" "His attorney was there, but he won't testify against his own client." "Do you have any recording, any proof?" I'd been so anxious that night, my hand had hit the voice memo app in my pocket without realizing it. A pocket dial that captured everything. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and played it for her. Jackson's voice came through, scratchy but clear. "I don't care what you have to say, Elena. Just sign the papers." My own voice, desperate. "Jackson, I need to tell you something important. Please just listen." I said, "Sign the papers." Harper's expression shifted from professional to furious in the space of a heartbeat. "This changes everything. He actively prevented you from disclosing. That audio is gold, Elena. Pure gold." "But what does it matter?" I signed. "It's done." "Not if we can prove coercion. Not if we can show he created an environment where you couldn't reasonably disclose the pregnancy." She pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "I'm taking your case, and I'm doing it pro bono. Harper, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking, I'm offering. Because 20 years ago, I was sitting where you are. Different man, same story, and no one helped me." She looked up, her eyes fierce. "So yeah, we're doing this." That night, I sat in my tiny studio apartment in Pilsen, staring at my laptop screen. I'd finally quit my job at Pierce Biotech. I couldn't keep working there, seeing Jackson's name on every email, every memo. But that meant no income, no insurance, and medical bills that were already starting to pile up. The cerclage procedure had cost $8,000. My emergency room visits were another $4,000, and I was only 6 weeks along. I had 34 more weeks to go if this baby made it to term. My savings account showed $3,216. I'd done the math 100 times. It didn't work. No matter how I calculated it, I couldn't afford to have this baby alone. I was about to close my laptop when a new email appeared. The sender was listed as A. Wolf Investments, LLC. The subject line, regarding your medical expenses. I almost deleted it as spam, but something made me open it. "Dear Miss Hart, I understand you recently required medical intervention for a pregnancy-related procedure. I would like to discuss covering these expenses in exchange for information about Pierce Biotech's research protocols. Please call at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Adrian Wolf. I read it 3 times. Then I Googled the name. Adrian Wolf, billionaire biotech investor. Net worth $2.3 billion. Silent partner in 47 medical technology companies. And there, buried in an old news article from 18 months ago, I found it. Wolf's sister, Maya Wolf, 29, died last week from complications related to multiple sclerosis. The family has requested privacy during this difficult time. I clicked through to more articles. Found one from a medical journal. Questions raised about Pierce Biotech's Neurodiag 3.0 after multiple false negatives. And there it was, the connection. Jackson's company had failed to diagnose Adrian Wolf's sister, and now he wanted to take Jackson down. The next evening, there was a knock on my apartment door. I opened it with the chain lock on because 6 years with Jackson had taught me to be careful. But 12 years in foster care before that had taught me to be paranoid. A tall man stood in the hallway. Expensive clothes that he wore like they meant nothing. Nordic features. Tired eyes that looked like they'd seen too much loss. Elena Hart, I'm Adrian Wolf. I paid for your medical procedure. And I need to talk to you about your ex-husband. How did you find my address? I asked through the gap in the door. I've been investigating Jackson Pierce for 18 months. When his credit card activities showed he canceled your insurance the same day as your divorce, I knew he fit the pattern. What pattern? Men who destroy women financially to maintain control. His voice was calm, matter of fact. Can I come in? I hesitated, then opened the door. But I stayed near the kitchen where I had a knife block within reach. Foster care taught you to always have an exit strategy. Adrian entered but didn't sit until I gestured to the second-hand futon. My sister Maya died 18 months ago. Multiple sclerosis. But she didn't have to die. Your ex-husband's company makes diagnostic software. Neurodiag 3.0. It gave her a false negative when she was in early stages. By the time she got a correct diagnosis, the damage was irreversible. I'm so sorry, I said and meant it. I've been building a case against Pierce Biotech. Financial fraud, manipulated clinical trials, falsified data. But I need someone with inside access, someone who knows how the company operates. I don't work there anymore. I resigned. Your credentials are still active. Jackson hasn't revoked them yet. Probably forgot. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I want to offer you a transaction. I cover all your medical expenses for the pregnancy. You use your analyst clearance to find evidence of fraud. I cross my arms. Why should I trust you? Because right now you have no insurance, no savings, a high-risk pregnancy, and an ex-husband who's about to announce his engagement to a supermodel while you're trying to afford groceries. I'm offering you a way to fight back. I don't want revenge. I want peace. Those aren't mutually exclusive. But peace without justice is just pretending. I looked at him, really looked. This wasn't a white knight. This was a man who wanted to burn down my ex-husband's empire, and he was offering me a match. If I do this, I need conditions, I said. Name them. 1, everything I find, I see first. I decide what gets used. 2, my baby comes first. If the stress is too much, I stop. 3, you don't lie to me, ever. I've had enough of men who lie. Adrian extended his hand. Deal. We shook. His hand was warm. I realized I'd been cold for months. The next day, I logged into Pierce Biotech's server from my laptop. My credentials still worked. I started in the financial folder. My area of expertise. Within an hour, I found it. $2.3 million transferred to a shell company called Helix Ventures, LLC. I dug deeper. Helix Ventures didn't exist. It was a ghost company. But the authorized signature on the transfer was Jackson Pierce. I took screenshots, sent them to Adrian. His response came immediately. This is just the first thread. Keep pulling. I didn't know that pulling that thread would unravel everything, or that in exactly 7 months, when I was lying in a hospital bed holding 2 tiny miracles, Jackson Pierce would be standing in the rain watching his entire world collapse. but I'm getting ahead of myself. 6 weeks later, I was 12 weeks pregnant. The cerclage procedure had worked. My morning sickness was brutal, but Dr. Morrison assured me that was actually a good sign. Strong hormones meant a strong pregnancy. I'd been working with Adrian for a month and a half, pulling financial records from Pierce Biotech's servers. The fraud was staggering. Not just Helix Ventures, 6 different shell companies, all receiving transfers from the R&D budget. $18.7 million over 3 years. Every transfer coincided with clinical trial deadlines. Every time Pierce Biotech was supposed to submit safety data to the FDA, money moved. I was on my laptop late one Tuesday night, deep in email archives, when my phone exploded with notifications. Text from an old colleague. Did you see? Another. I'm so sorry, Elena. Confused, I opened Instagram. Jackson's post appeared at the top of my feed. A professional photo shoot. Jackson in a tuxedo, a woman in a white dress beside him. She was holding up her left hand, displaying a diamond that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. The caption read, "She said yes. When you know," followed by champagne and ring emojis, hashtag future wife, hashtag new beginnings. The woman was Sienna Vale, international model, Victoria's Secret, Sports Illustrated, the kind of beauty that made normal women feel invisible. And Jackson had proposed to her 6 weeks after our divorce. I scrolled through the comments. 37,000 in the first hour. Congrats! You two are perfect together. Wait, wasn't he just married? Who's the ex-wife? Anyone know? I heard she couldn't have kids. So sad, but he deserves happiness. That last comment hit like a physical blow. I ran to the bathroom and vomited. Partly pregnancy nausea, mostly devastation. My phone rang. Harper. Don't look at social media, she said. I laughed bitterly. Too late. Listen to me. This is good. How is this good? Because now we have timeline evidence. You suspected an affair. This proves it. He had this relationship ready to go. Doesn't matter, Harper. He's won. He's got his perfect life, and I stopped, pressed my hand to my stomach. There, a flutter. Tiny, like butterfly wings. Elena, you still there? The baby just moved, I whispered. For the first time. Harper's voice softened. Then he hasn't won. You have something real. He has a photo op. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like drowning. The next morning, I received a bill from the hospital. $45,000 for my emergency room visits and monitoring. I called the billing department, hands shaking. I thought those charges were covered. The anonymous payment only covered procedure code 59320. Your ER visits and monitoring are separate charges. I hung up and stared at my savings account. $3,000 left. That same afternoon, I got an email from the competitor firm where I'd applied for a remote analyst position. We regret to inform you that we're moving forward with other candidates. I called their HR department. Can I ask why? I thought the interviews went well. The HR representative's voice was uncomfortable. We received information about your professional conduct at your previous employer. What information? I can't discuss specifics. Good luck in your search. Someone had sabotaged me. I knew it was Jackson. And then the final blow came. Pierce Biotech announced a new corporate initiative that same week. CEO Jackson Pierce launches Family First program, the press release declared. The program included 6 months paid parental leave, fertility treatment coverage, $10,000 annual childcare stipend. Jackson's quote made me want to scream. As someone about to start a family with my incredible fiancée Senna, I understand how important family support is. Every employee deserves what we're building together. The internet loved it. Hashtag family first trended. Business journals praised him. Young CEO shows heart, they said. I read it while sitting on my futon, eating ramen, pregnant with his children, buried in medical debt that would take me years to pay off. That night, I called Miss Walsh. She'd been my guidance counselor at my last foster placement, the only adult in my childhood who'd actually seen me. Elena, her voice was warm, surprised. How are you, sweetheart? I tried to speak. couldn't, just sobbed. Where are you? Are you safe? I'm safe, I managed. I'm just so tired of surviving. Surviving what, honey? Everything. I thought I'd finally built something and it all fell apart, again, just like always. Listen to me, Miss Walsh said, her voice fierce. You survived 12 foster homes. You survived every person who said you'd never make it. You survived losing everyone you ever tried to love. This man, he's just one more thing you'll survive. But I don't know how. Yes, you do, because you've got someone depending on you now, don't you? I touched my stomach. Two someones. Twins. Oh, baby. Her voice broke. You're going to be okay. You hear me? You're going to be okay. But I didn't believe her. 3 months after the engagement announcement and estimate, I was 22 weeks pregnant. Visibly showing now, I couldn't hide it anymore. I sat in Adrian's downtown office, spreading printed financial documents across his minimalist desk. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the Chicago skyline, but I wasn't looking at the view. Helix Ventures isn't the only ghost company, I said. I found 6 more, all receiving transfers from Pierce Biotech's R&D budget. Total, $18.7 million over 3 years. Adrian studied the documents, his expression darkening. And the authorized signatures? All Jackson. But here's what's interesting. I pulled up a spreadsheet on my laptop. The transfers correlate with clinical trial deadlines. Every time Pierce Biotech was supposed to submit safety data to the FDA, money moved. He was paying to falsify results or hide adverse events. I found emails. I turned the laptop toward him. Jackson to the lead researcher, Dr. Kim, regarding the seizure incidents in Trial 3B. Let's discuss alternative interpretations before the FDA filing. Adrian's jaw tightened. That trial included Maya. 3B was the multiple sclerosis diagnostic protocol. I'm sorry, I said gently. He stood, walked to the window, his back to me. His shoulders were rigid with barely contained rage. How many patients were in that trial, he asked. I checked my notes. 247. How many adverse events were reinterpreted? 14 seizures, 9 hospitalizations, 1 death. He turned and I saw something in his face I hadn't seen before. Not just grief, pure rage. We're going to destroy him, he said quietly. Before I could respond, a sharp pain shot through my abdomen. I gasped, hand flying to my stomach. Adrian was beside me instantly. What's wrong? Nothing, I said, breathing through it. Just Braxton Hicks contractions. They're normal. You're working too much. I'm fine. Elena, you've been here for 6 hours. You haven't eaten. You look exhausted. I said I'm fine, I snapped. No, you're not. And I'm not letting you kill yourself for my revenge. I stood angry now. This isn't just about you. He lied to me too. He made me think I was broken. Do you know what that does to a person? To believe you're fundamentally defective? So prove him wrong. Have healthy babies. Live a good life. You don't need to. Don't tell me what I need. You're not my husband. You're not even my friend. We have a business arrangement. The words came out harsher than I meant. Adrian's expression shuddered immediately. You're right, he said quietly. I apologize for overstepping. He walked to his desk, pulled out an envelope. Your compensation for this month's work, $5,000. Covers medical bills and living expenses. I took it, feeling awful. Adrian, I didn't mean you were clear about boundaries from the start. I should respect them. Something had shifted between us. Something neither of us wanted to name. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept working, kept digging through files. That's when I found it. Jackson's personal fertility evaluation, buried in a file labeled Health Insurance Claims 2019. I opened it with shaking hands. Banner Diagnostics, Fertility Assessment. Patient, Jackson Pierce. Date, March 15th, 2019, 4 months before the divorce. Results, sperm count low normal, 18 million per milliliter. Motility 35%, below optimal 40%. Diagnosis, temporary oligospermia secondary to stress. Prognosis, fertility likely to improve within 6 months with lifestyle modifications. And then the line that changed everything. Patient remains fertile. Conception possible during recovery window. Jackson knew. He knew he could still father children when he divorced me. He blamed me for the miscarriages. But he was the one with documented fertility issues. And 4 months after that diagnosis, I got pregnant, right in that recovery window. I called Harper, even though it was 1 in the morning. Elena? She sounded groggy. What's wrong? He knew, I said. I have the medical records. He knew he could still get me pregnant when he pushed the divorce. There was a pause. Then, send me everything. Now. I forwarded the files, sat in the dark, staring at my laptop screen. Jackson had known everything, and he'd lied anyway. 1 month later, I was 26 weeks pregnant with twins. Dr. Morrison had confirmed it at my 20-week ultrasound. 2 boys, both measuring small but healthy. Harper, Adrian, and I sat in a hospital conference room. I'd been put on modified bed rest after some early contractions, so we met at Boston General instead of Harper's office. We have everything, Harper said, spreading documents across the table. The fertility records, the financial fraud, the falsified clinical trials, the audio of him refusing to hear you. This is airtight. What's the play? Adrian asked. We submit the fraud evidence to the SEC and FBI. We file for retroactive child support and medical expenses. And if you're willing, Elena, we go public. Public how? A press statement. You tell your story, the pregnancy he didn't know about, the medical lies, the financial abuse. We control the narrative before he does. I was scared. What if no one believes me? They'll believe you, Adrian said. We have evidence. Harper outlined the timeline. Monday, we submit to federal agencies. Wednesday, we file civil suit. Friday, we release my statement. That's 3 days from now, I said. Jackson is in Los Angeles this weekend for a biotech conference. He'll be distracted. We hit him while he's not looking. I looked at both of them. This was real. We were really doing this. Okay, I said, voice shaking. Let's do it. Adrian reached across the table, covered my hand with his. You're not alone in this. Our eyes met. Something unspoken passed between us. But that same night, everything changed. In Los Angeles, Sienna Vale couldn't sleep. Jackson was in the shower. His laptop was open on the hotel bed. She'd been feeling paranoid lately. Little things, Jackson getting secretive calls, him snapping when she asked about wedding plans, finding searches for Elena Hart Boston in his browser history. Boston? Why was he searching his ex-wife in Boston? The laptop screen was still lit, email open. Sienna knew she shouldn't look, but something in her gut said to look anyway. She clicked on Jackson's sent folder, scrolled, found an email from 2 weeks ago to someone named Marcus Vale, her brother. The subject line, background check, urgent. Marcus, I need everything you can find on Adrian Wolfe and his connection to Elena. She's been accessing company files. If she's working with Wolfe, I need leverage. Full surveillance. Where she's living, who she's seeing, medical records if you can get them. Bill me directly. Sienna can't know about this. -J, Sienna's blood ran cold. Her brother was working for Jackson? Spying on his ex-wife? And why couldn't she know? She heard the shower turn off, quickly closed the laptop. Jackson emerged, towel around his waist. Hey, babe, come here. She forced a smile. I'm exhausted. Big shoot tomorrow. Right, the Vogue thing. It was Sports Illustrated. She'd told him 4 times. He didn't remember. He kissed her forehead dismissively and climbed into bed, already scrolling through his phone. Sienna pretended to sleep. But at 2 in the morning, she locked herself in the bathroom and called her brother. You're spying on Jackson's ex-wife? She whispered furiously. For him? Marcus sighed. It's a boop-bob, Sienna. What did you find? I can't. Marcus, I'm your sister. What did you find? Long pause. She's pregnant. Twins. Due in 3 months. Sienna's world tilted. How far along? About 26 weeks, which means she got pregnant right before the divorce. Does Jackson know? I just sent him the surveillance report tonight. Sienna pulled up her phone calendar, calculating backward. 26 weeks meant conception in mid-July. The divorce was filed July 15th. They're his, she said. DNA would confirm, but timeline-wise, yeah. Sienna hung up, slid down the bathroom wall. Everything was a lie. Jackson didn't leave his wife because she couldn't have children. He left her while she was pregnant with his children, and he'd been lying to Sienna ever since. The next morning, Jackson was reading Marcus's surveillance report in his hotel suite when his hands started shaking. Pregnant, twins, 26 weeks. He calculated. 26 weeks was 6.5 months. The divorce was 6.5 months ago. He pulled up his calendar from last year. July 14th, the night before he filed, the night he came home late and Elena was crying, trying to talk to him, and he told her he was too tired for her drama. Oh God. His phone rang, Sienna. He didn't answer. It rang again. Hey, he said, voice strange. You okay? You sound weird. Fine, just work stuff. Want to talk about it? No, it's handled. He hung up before she could press. Then he called his attorney, the expensive one. My ex-wife is pregnant, he said without preamble. Congratulations? They might be mine. After a long pause. Explain. Jackson explained everything. The timeline, the pregnancy, Adrian Wolf, the fraud case being built against him. Does Wolf have evidence? His attorney asked. Jackson lied. No, he has nothing. And the pregnancy? I need a paternity test, and I need to stop her from going public with lies about me. His attorney sighed. If the children are yours, you have parental rights. But the divorce papers, there was a clause. What clause? Yeah. Jackson pulled up the PDF. It says we both waive claims to children conceived before separation. Did you know she was pregnant when you signed? No. Oh, did she? Jackson paused. I don't know. If she knew and didn't disclose, that's fraud. We can void the clause, but Jackson, even if they're yours, do you want these children in your life? I can't let her win, Jackson said. This isn't about winning. Think strategically. If you fight for custody, your entire personal life becomes public record. The affair with Sienna, everything. I don't care. I want to discredit her before she talks. I want restraining orders. And I want the whole world to know she's a liar. Monday morning, I woke up to 47 missed calls. Harper's voice was tense when I answered. Don't leave your apartment. Don't talk to anyone. Jackson filed a restraining order against you and Adrian. What? For what? He's claiming corporate espionage and harassment. And Elena, he released a statement to the press an hour ago. What did it say? Harper read it to me. My ex-wife Elena Hart has been working with a known corporate saboteur to spread malicious lies about my company. These baseless accusations are part of a calculated extortion attempt. I am pursuing all legal remedies. I opened Twitter. Hashtag Jackson Pierce and hashtag Elena Hart were both trending. The first tweet I saw, Jackson Pierce's ex-wife allegedly collaborating with a rival billionaire to fabricate fraud claims. Pierce's attorney calls it revenge disguised as justice. The replies made me sick. Gold Digger couldn't trap him, so now she's trying to destroy him. Women like this make it hard for real victims. Why should we believe her? Where's the proof? Then the death threats started. Unknown numbers, anonymous accounts. You lying bitch. I hope you lose those bastard babies. Someone should teach you what happens to whores who ruin good men. I dropped my phone. Couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was caving in. Adrian arrived 20 minutes later with Harper. Found me on my bathroom floor, sobbing. Elena, we're going to fix this, Harper said, kneeling beside me. How? I couldn't stop crying. He made me look like a liar. No one will believe me now. Adrian took the phone from my hands, turned it off. Let them talk. We have evidence. The truth doesn't matter if no one believes it. I was almost screaming now. You don't understand what it's like. I spent my whole childhood being the problem. The foster kid no one wanted. The girl who was too quiet, too weird, too broken. And I finally got people to see me differently. And now Jackson's taken that too. You're not broken, Harper said. I laughed bitterly. Aren't I? I'm 26 weeks pregnant with twins. I'm alone. I have no job, no family. I'm living off charity. My ex-husband just convinced the internet I'm a criminal. And tomorrow I'm supposed to stand up and tell my story like anyone will care. I care, Adrian said quietly. I looked at him, really looked. I know this started as a transaction, he continued, but Elena, what Jackson did to you is unforgivable. What he did to Maya is unforgivable. And I'm not walking away. Why? Why do you care so much? His voice broke. Because I couldn't save my sister. I had all the money in the world and I watched her die anyway. And every day since, I've been trying to make it mean something. But you don't need saving. You're already the strongest person I've ever met. I just want to stand beside you while you fight. Something in me cracked open. I reached for his hand. We sat there on my bathroom floor holding hands while Harper stepped out to give us privacy. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to wait for Harper's carefully crafted press release. I was going to tell my story myself, now. Raw, unfiltered. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera app, pressed record. I sat in my small apartment, 26 weeks pregnant, exhausted, but with eyes that finally saw clearly. My name is Elena Hart, I said to the camera. 6 months ago, my husband Jackson Pierce forced me to sign divorce papers in his office while his lawyer watched. I had found out I was pregnant that same day. I tried to tell him 3 times. He wouldn't listen. You can hear it yourself. I played the audio clip. Jackson's voice, cold and dismissive. My voice, desperate and ignored. That baby I was trying to tell him about, it's actually 2 babies, twin boys, due in 3 months, and I have medical records proving he knew he could still father children when he divorced me. He lied, not just to me, to everyone. I held up the documents, careful to protect private details but showing they were official. For 6 years, I stayed silent. I stayed quiet because I thought that's what good wives do. I blamed myself for 2 miscarriages that weren't my fault. I let him convince me I was broken. And when he threw me away, I believed I deserved it. But I don't, and neither do these babies. My voice cracked, but I kept going. Jackson Pierce says I'm trying to extort him, but I don't want his money. I don't want custody of his time. I don't even want an apology anymore. I just want the truth on the record. So that 10 years from now, when my sons ask me why their father wasn't there, I can show them this video, and they'll know it wasn't because they weren't wanted. It was because he chose not to listen. I stopped the recording, posted it everywhere, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, titled The Truth About Jackson Pierce. Within 1 hour, it had 100,000 views. Within 3 hours, 2 million. Within 12 hours, it was everywhere. The internet chose a side. And for once, it was mine. #Believe, Elena trended worldwide. The video reached 12 million views in the first day. News coverage exploded. Pregnant woman accuses ex-husband of forcing divorce while expecting. The New York Times, biotech CEO faces backlash after ex-wife's viral video. On TikTok, thousands of women posted their own stories with #signed in tears. But it wasn't unanimous. The internet never is. Team Elena, about 55%. The audio recording doesn't lie. He refused to listen. Imagine being pregnant and your husband won't even let you speak. This is what coercive control looks like. Team Jackson, about 30%. She's working with his business rival. This is corporate sabotage. If she was really pregnant, why didn't she make him listen? Men move on fast, doesn't make them abusers. And then there were the chaos agents who just wanted drama. But the narrative was shifting. Celebrities started weighing in. A famous actress who'd gone through a public divorce tweeted, "I believe Elena Hart. I've been the woman trying to speak while a powerful man talks over you. #signed in tears." Jackson saw it all from his hotel room in Los Angeles. Saw the view count climbing. Saw the hashtags. Saw his carefully constructed image crumbling. His PR team held an emergency meeting. Sienna sat beside him, quiet and watchful. "We need to address the paternity question," his PR lead said. "No," Jackson said. "Jackson, the longer you refuse, the guiltier you look. If the babies aren't yours, demand a DNA test. If they are, own it and claim you didn't know. Sienna spoke for the first time. Are they yours? Everyone stopped. Jackson turned to her. What? The babies. Are they yours? Sienna, not now, she stood. Are they? I don't know. The timeline is pretty clear, Jackson. She's 26 weeks pregnant. Your divorce was 6.5 months ago. Math isn't that hard. His PR lead shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should take a break. Sienna ignored him. Did you know she was pregnant when you divorced her? Of course not. Did you suspect? Jackson paused. No. You're lying. Her voice was cold. Don't gaslight me like you did her. I heard the audio. You wouldn't let her speak, which means you suspected something and didn't want to hear it. I wanted a divorce. That's not a crime. No, but lying to me is. She pulled off her engagement ring, set it on the conference table. I'm done. Jackson's panic was immediate. Sienna, wait. You want to know what's crazy? She stood at the door. I actually loved you. I thought you were brilliant and driven, and that you chose to EM because you saw something real. But you just wanted an accessory, someone who looked good in photos and didn't ask questions. Well, congratulations. You're about to find out what life looks like when everyone asks questions. She walked out. The PR team sat in stunned silence. Get her back, Jackson said to no one in particular. But Sienna was already in the elevator, phone in hand, calling her manager. I need you to set up a meeting, she said, with Elena Hart's attorney. 2 days later, Harper called me with news that changed everything. Sienna Vale just sent me evidence that buries Jackson, she said. I was in the hospital by then. Early contractions had started, and Dr. Morrison wanted me on bed rest with monitoring. Adrian was beside me, as he'd been almost every day. What kind of evidence? I asked. His fertility report, surveillance records proving he had you followed, emails showing he planned to discredit you, everything we needed and more. She's willing to testify if needed. Why would she help me? Because he lied to her too, and she's done being part of his lies. I looked at Adrian. So we have everything now? We have enough to destroy him, Harper confirmed. But Elena, there's something else. Jackson's attorney filed for an emergency paternity test. He wants DNA confirmation. And if he can prove paternity, he's going to fight the forfeiture clause. My hand went to my stomach. The clause is ironclad. You said, it is. Unless he can prove you committed fraud by not disclosing the pregnancy. That's his argument. He wants you to testify under oath about when exactly you found out. I tried to tell him we have the audio. I know, but his lawyers will argue the audio doesn't prove you were pregnant at that moment. We need to prove you knew before you signed. I remembered the pregnancy test, the photo I'd taken with the timestamp. I have it, I said. I took a picture. The metadata shows exactly when. Harper's voice filled with relief. Send it to me. Now. But before I could, another cramp hit, stronger than before. Adrian, I gasped. Something's wrong. He was already hitting the call button for the nurse. Within seconds, alarms were going off. Monitors beeping. Dr. Morrison rushing in. Elena, you're dilating. We need to stop this labor or we're delivering today. It's too early. They're only 26 weeks. I know. We're going to try to stop it. But Elena, you need to prepare yourself. If we can't, these babies are coming whether we're ready or not. They pumped me full of medication. Magnesium sulfate that made me feel like I was burning from the inside out. Steroids for the baby's lungs in case they couldn't stop the labor. Adrian held my hand through all of it. You're okay, he kept saying. The babies are okay. But we didn't know that. We couldn't know. Somehow the hospital staff leaked information to TMZ. A photo appeared online within hours. Adrian in the hallway outside my room, his face stricken with fear. The caption, Adrian Wolf and Elena Hart, more than business partners. The internet exploded again. Wait, are those Wolf's babies? Plot twist of the century. So she was having an affair. Jackson was right. Jackson saw the photo, saw Adrian's hand on my shoulder in one shot, and something in him snapped. He called his attorney. I want a paternity test, today. 3 weeks after I was hospitalized, the doctors finally got my labor stopped. I was 29 weeks pregnant, still on strict bed rest, still terrified. Adrian never left. He brought his laptop, worked from the chair beside my hospital bed, slept there most nights. The nurses started calling him my husband. We never corrected them. One afternoon, Harper burst into my room, breathless. "Turn on the TV, Channel 7, now." Adrian grabbed the remote. The news was already rolling. Breaking news, Jackson Pierce wedding postponed as the bride fails to appear. The screens showed footage of the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills, thousands of white orchids, a string quartet, guests in formal wear, looking confused and uncomfortable. The reporter's voice continued. What was supposed to be the wedding of the year has turned into a social media spectacle. Sources say bride Sienna Vale never showed up to her own wedding, leaving groom Jackson Pierce waiting for over an hour. They cut to grainy phone footage taken by a guest. Jackson in a tuxedo, pacing, phone pressed to his ear, clearly shouting. The venue coordinator approached him nervously. He waved her away with barely contained rage. Guests began leaving around 3 p.m. when it became clear the ceremony wasn't happening, the reporter continued. Pierce's publicist released a brief statement saying the wedding has been postponed due to unforeseen circumstances. But sources close to the couple say Sienna Vale ended the relationship 3 weeks ago and Jackson refused to cancel the wedding. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He tried to have the wedding anyway, without a bride? Apparently he thought she'd show up, Harper said, or that he could convince her. Adrian shook his head. That's not narcissism, that's delusion. The news continued with Sienna's Instagram post, a professional photo of her looking serene, natural, no makeup. Her statement read, I've spent the past 3 weeks reflecting on my relationship with Jackson Pierce. What I realized is that I was complicit in a narrative that hurt an innocent woman. Elena Hart deserves the truth, and so do I. I've provided evidence to her legal team that proves Jackson knew he could father children when he divorced her. I was lied to, she was lied to, and I refuse to be part of his lies anymore. I wish him healing, but I'm moving forward with my truth. The post had over 500,000 comments already. Queen behavior. She really said I'm taking him down on my way out. The character development is insane. I stared at the screen in disbelief. She helped me. She helped herself, Harper clarified. But yes, the evidence she provided sealed his fate. That evidence included Jackson's fertility report, surveillance logs proving he had had me followed, and email chains between Jackson and his PR team discussing how to discredit me before I could speak. Which is why the judge ruled in our favor this morning, Harper continued. What? The emergency paternity test Jackson requested? Approved, but with conditions. Results are sealed until after the babies are born. And regardless of paternity, the forfeiture clause stands. He has no parental rights. I could barely breathe. We won. The custody battle? Yes. The fraud case is still building. But Jackson's world, it is collapsing. On screen, the news showed Jackson leaving the venue, surrounded by photographers. Mr. Pierce, any comment on the wedding, on Elena Hart, on the allegations? Jackson shoved cameras away. No comment. Is it true you knew you were fertile when you divorced your wife? He stopped, turned to the camera. His face was a mask of barely controlled rage. My ex-wife is a liar. She's working with my business rivals to destroy me. Everything she said is fabricated, and when the truth comes out, another reporter interrupted. Then why did Sienna Vale corroborate her story? She provided evidence supporting Elena Hart's claims. Do you have a response? Jackson's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His attorney pulled him toward a waiting car. The footage ended with Jackson's face, devastated and furious, staring at the camera before the door slammed. He really thought he'd win, I whispered. Men like Jackson always do, Adrian said quietly, right up until they lose everything. That night, Jackson sat alone in his penthouse apartment. The board had voted to remove him as CEO that morning. Forced resignation. The severance package was $20 million, but it came with ironclad non-disclosure agreements and a lifetime ban from the biotech industry. His phone buzzed with notifications he didn't want to read. Pierce Biotech stock down 34%. Hashtag Jackson Pierce is over trending, #1 worldwide. Board calling emergency meeting. He opened Twitter. A mistake. Jackson Pierce really stood at that altar like a Disney villain waiting for a bride who was done with his lies. Poetic justice. Imagine being so delusional you plan a wedding after your fiancé dumps you. Sir, that's not confidence. That's a mental breakdown. The worst one had 2.3 million likes. Elena Hart signed those divorce papers in tears. Today, Jackson Pierce stood alone in a tux, crying, "That's karma." For the first time in his life, Jackson was completely alone. No wife, no fiancé, no company, no children, legally speaking, nothing. In my hospital room, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. Sienna had posted again. A photo of herself in a simple white t-shirt, barefaced, looking directly at the camera with something like peace. Her caption, "My mom had 3 miscarriages before me. She never talked about them. She carried that pain alone because my dad didn't want to hear about it." Sound familiar? To every woman who's been told she's too emotional, too dramatic, too mom, you're not. You're exactly enough and you deserve a partner who listens. I'm sorry it took me this long to learn that. At Elena Hart, I'm sorry I was part of your pain. You deserve better. We all do. I stared at the post for a long time. Then I typed a comment, deleted it, tried again. Deleted that too. Finally, I just posted a blue heart emoji. Within minutes, Sienna replied with the same. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was understanding. 2 women who'd been pitted against each other finding a moment of shared truth. Adrian stirred in his chair. You okay? Yeah, just processing everything. It's a lot. I looked at him, this man who'd been beside me through everything. Adrian, when this is over, when the babies are born and everything is settled, what happens to us? He sat up, suddenly very awake. What do you mean? Our deal. You paying my bills in exchange for helping with the investigation? That's almost done. So what happens after? What do you want to happen? I took a breath. I think I'd like to try. If you want to. The whole trusting someone thing. He smiled. I'd like that too. He reached for my hand. I let him take it. And for the first time in months, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. But I didn't know that 48 hours later, everything would change again. 2 days after the failed wedding at 3:47 in the morning, I woke up to pain, sharp, rhythmic, different from the practice contractions. I pressed the call button. The nurse arrived in seconds, checked the monitor, and her expression changed immediately. I'm getting Dr. Morrison. No, it's too early, I said, panic rising. They're not ready. But Dr. Morrison was already there, checking my cervix. You're at 6 centimeters. The cerclage is breaking down. We need to deliver now. It's too soon. They're only 30 weeks. Elena, if we don't deliver now, we risk losing both of them. The words hit like a physical blow. Call Adrian, I managed. Please, I can't do this alone. Adrian burst through the delivery room doors minutes later, still wearing yesterday's clothes, hair disheveled. He grabbed my hand. I'm here. I'm right here. I'm scared. Me too. But those babies are fighters, just like you. Everything happened fast after that. Anesthesia, monitors, surgical drapes, Dr. Morrison's calm voice guiding me through each step. First incision, she said. I held my breath. I've got baby A. A cry, thin and reedy, but fierce. It's a boy, Dr. Morrison said, smiling. They held him up briefly, tiny, red, but alive and screaming. I sobbed. 3 pounds, 4 ounces, a nurse announced. Strong cry. Good signs. They rushed him to the NICU team waiting in the corner. Baby B is coming, Dr. Morrison said. Come on, little one. Seconds felt like hours. Why isn't he crying? I asked desperately. He's smaller. Give him a moment. Then a second cry. Weaker, but there. Another boy. Smaller, but breathing on his own. 2 pounds, 11 ounces. Both babies were rushed to isolates, surrounded by neonatal specialists. An hour later, they wheeled me into the NICU. 2 isolates side by side. Baby A had his eyes open, looking around. Baby B was smaller, more wires, but his chest was rising and falling steadily. They're doing well considering, Dr. Morrison said. Baby A is stronger. Baby B will need more support. But Elena, they're here. They're alive. I reached through the porthole, touched baby A's tiny hand. He gripped my finger. I broke down completely. A nurse approached gently. Have you chosen names? I looked at baby A. Lucas, it means light. Then at baby B, Noah. It means rest, because he's going to rest and grow strong. Beautiful names, the nurse said. But within hours, someone at the hospital leaked a photo to TMZ. The NICU registry showing Hart, Lucas and Hart, Noah, both with the father field blank. Another photo showed Adrian in the NICU, his hand on my shoulder as we both looked at the babies with unmistakable tenderness. The headlines exploded. Elena Hart gives birth to premature twins. Father still unknown. Adrian Wolf present for birth. Twins his? Hashtag Wolf babies started trending. Jackson saw the photos from his nearly empty penthouse, saw the blank father field, saw Adrian's hand on my shoulder. He picked up his phone and called his attorney. I want a DNA test. Now. Jackson, we've been through this. The court already ruled. I don't care what the court said. Those are my children. Set up the test. Even if they're yours, you can't claim them. Legally, you're a stranger. Jackson hung up, stared at the photo again. 2 boys, his sons, and he'd never hold them. The twins spent 47 days in the NICU, 47 days of machines helping them breathe, of alarms in the night, of me sleeping in a chair beside their isolettes praying they'd make it. Adrian never left my side. Lucas came off support first, started eating on his own, gaining weight. Noah took longer, had some setbacks, a feeding tube, oxygen support, but slowly, steadily, he got stronger. During those weeks, the SEC formally charged Jackson with securities fraud. The FBI opened a criminal investigation into the falsified clinical trials. Pierce Biotech's board settled with multiple patients who'd been harmed by the faulty diagnostic software. Jackson's net worth went from $340 million to essentially zero after legal fees and settlements. And through it all, I sat beside 2 tiny isolettes, watching my sons fight to live, knowing their father would never know them. 6 weeks after the twins were born, Harper called with final news. The judge ruled. Emergency motion to testify, denied. The forfeiture clause stands permanently. And there's more. I'm issuing a restraining order. Jackson can't contact you or approach within 500 feet of you or the children. I was holding Lucas when she told me. He was finally big enough to leave his isolette for short periods. It's really over, I whispered. It's over. That night, Jackson's attorney convinced him to take a plea deal on the fraud charges. 18 months in federal prison instead of 10 years. His last chance to avoid complete destruction. He took it. 6 months later, on a warm spring afternoon, I sat on the porch of Adrian's house in Connecticut. Lucas and Noah were on a blanket, 8 months old now, adjusted age 6 months. Rolling, babbling, thriving. Adrian brought out 2 mugs of coffee. They're getting so big. I know. Sometimes I can't believe they were ever that small. He sat beside me. We'd settled into something beautiful. Not rushed, not forced, just real. Mail came, he said, handing me an envelope. The return address made my breath catch. FCI Danbury, Federal Prison. Jackson had written to me. You don't have to read it, Adrian said. I know, but I opened it anyway. The letter was short, handwritten. His usually perfect script was shaky. Elena, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to respond, but I need to say things I should have said a long time ago. I'm sorry for the way I treated you, for making you believe you weren't enough, for blaming you for things that were never your fault, for not listening when you needed me most. I've had a lot of time to think in here, about my mother, about how I spent my whole life trying to outrun the fear of failure. And in doing so, I failed at the one thing that actually mattered, being a good person to the woman I loved. Because I did love you, Elena. I know I had a terrible way of showing it, but you were the best thing in my life. And I threw you away because I was too proud and too scared to admit I needed help. I saw a photo of the twins. Someone sent it to me. Lucas looks like my mother. Noah has your smile. They're beautiful. I'm not writing to ask for a relationship with them. I know I have no right. I'm writing because I need you to know it was never your fault. The miscarriages, the divorce, my failures, all of it was me. I hope you're happy. I hope you found someone who treats you the way you deserved all along. You were always enough, Elena, more than enough. I'm sorry it took me losing everything to see it. Jackson. I read it twice, tears streaming down my face. Adrian read it when I handed it to him. His expression softened. How do you feel? I don't know. Sad, relieved. It doesn't change anything. But I think I needed to hear it. Are you going to write back? I watched Lucas grab Noah's foot. Noah squealed with laughter. No, I think this is where I let go. He said what he needed to say. Now I can move forward without carrying him anymore. Adrian took my hand. You're incredible. I'm just trying to survive. No, you're thriving. And Elena, I need to tell you something. My heart raced. What? I'm in love with you. I have been for months. I know you might not be ready to hear that, but I couldn't go another day without saying it. My breath caught. Adrian, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. I smiled through my tears. You didn't let me finish. I was going to say I love you too. His face broke into the widest smile I'd ever seen. He leaned in and kissed me. Soft, gentle, full of promise. Lucas made a squawking sound, jealous. We both laughed. 2 years later, the small park in Boston was crowded with families on this sunny Saturday afternoon. I pushed Lucas and Noah on the swings, their shrieks of laughter making my heart full. They were 2 years old now, healthy, happy, thriving beyond what any of the NICU doctors had predicted. A woman approached hesitantly, mid-30s, nervous energy. Excuse me, are you Elena Hart? I tensed automatically, protective instincts kicking in. Yes? Her eyes welled up. I just wanted to thank you. I saw your video, the one about Jackson. It gave me the courage to leave my husband. I have full custody of my daughter now. And I wanted you to know you saved us. My throat tightened. You saved yourself. I'm just glad it helped. Can I hug you? Of course, Wake. We embraced. Two strangers connected by survival. After she left, I wiped my eyes. Adrian appeared with the ice cream cones. You okay? Yeah, just grateful. We sat on a bench watching the twins play. We'd gotten married the previous year. Small ceremony. Just us, the boys, and Miss Walsh, who'd walk me down the aisle crying the whole way. Adrian had legally adopted Lucas and Noah. Their birth certificates now listed him as their father. Not because biology didn't matter, but because love mattered more. I'd started a nonprofit called Signed in Tears, legal support for women navigating divorce during pregnancy. We'd helped 847 women so far. The work was hard but meaningful. Every woman we helped felt like I was rewriting my own story with a better ending. Jackson had been released from prison 8 months ago. I'd heard through Harper that he'd moved to Montana, opened a small veterinary practice. Apparently he'd wanted to be a vet before his mother pushed him toward medicine. I hoped he'd found some measure of peace. Lucas ran over breathless. Mama, swing more! Noah was right behind him. Me too, me too. I laughed. All right, one more time. Adrian stood. I've got this round. You rest. He ran to the swings, scooped both boys up, made them giggle with delight. I watched my family, my heart so full it hurt. People asked me sometimes if I'd forgiven Jackson. The truth was, I didn't know. Forgiveness wasn't a switch you flipped. It was a process. Some days I was angry, some days I was solid, some days I just was. But what I did know was this: I'd survived, my boys had survived, and we'd built something beautiful from the ruins. Jackson sent one more letter after that first one. I didn't read it. I donated it, unopened, to my nonprofit's archives. Because my story wasn't about him anymore. It was about what came after. The twins asked about their biological father sometimes, in the simple way toddlers did. I told them the truth, age appropriately, that their first father wasn't ready to be a dad, but that didn't mean they weren't wanted. They were so wanted. Miss Walsh called every month like clockwork. How are my boys, she'd ask. And I'd tell her everything, every milestone, every triumph, every ordinary beautiful moment. She'd been right all those years ago. I didn't just survive, I thrived. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Adrian and I sat on our back porch in Connecticut. The farmhouse we'd bought together, the life we'd built from scratch. I got a call from Sienna today, I said. Adrian raised his eyebrows. Really? She's starting her own nonprofit, mental health support for models and influencers. She wanted advice on structure. That's good. She's doing good work. She mentioned Jackson, actually, said he'd reached out to her a few months ago, apologizing. She didn't respond, but she thought I should know he was trying to make amends. How does that make you feel? I thought about it. Indifferent, mostly. His apologies don't change what happened, but I hope he's genuinely trying to be better. Not for me, just for himself. Adrian took my hand. You're a better person than most. I'm just tired of carrying anger. It's heavy. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the fireflies start to appear in the growing dusk. I never thought I'd have this, I said quietly. A family, a home, peace. You deserve all of it and more. We deserve it, both of us. I looked at him. You saved me too, you know, not in a white knight way, but you stood beside me when I had nothing to offer, when I was just a broken woman with impossible odds. You saw me. You were never broken. You were rebuilding. There's a difference. Inside, one of the boys cried out, "Nightmare." We both stood automatically. I've got it, Adrian said. You took the last one. I watched him go inside, heard his gentle voice soothing Noah back to sleep. Heard Noah's small voice saying, "Love you, Daddy." Heard Adrian respond, "Love you too, buddy. Always." And I thought about that night in Jackson's office. The pen scratching across paper. The 23 seconds that changed everything. I'd signed those papers in tears, but I wasn't crying anymore. 5 years after the divorce, I stood in a conference room at the Boston Convention Center. Behind me, a screen showed the Signed in Tears logo. Before me, 200 women sat in chairs, notebooks ready, hope and fear mixed in their expressions. My name is Elena Hart, I began. And 7 years ago, I signed divorce papers while pregnant with twins. Papers that ended my marriage to a man who refused to listen. I'm here today to tell you that signing those papers was the best mistake of my life. The women leaned forward. I say mistake because I went into that office thinking I had no choice, thinking I was powerless, thinking my only option was to accept what was happening to me. But what I learned is that even in our weakest moments, we have more power than we realize. The power to tell our truth, the power to ask for help, the power to survive. I clicked to the next slide. Statistics about women, divorce, and pregnancy. 1 in 3 women experiences coercive control in relationships. 1 in 4 faces financial abuse. And too many of us carry the weight of these experiences alone, believing we're isolated in our pain. We're not. We never were. After my presentation during the break, a young woman approached. Early 20s, pregnant, scared eyes. I'm thinking about leaving my husband, she whispered. But I don't have anywhere to go. No money, no family support. I took her hands. You just took the first step by saying it out loud. Let me give you some resources. I handed her information about shelters, legal aid, emergency funds. Watched her eyes fill with tears of relief. You're not alone, I told her. Not anymore. That evening, I drove home to Connecticut. The farmhouse was lit up, warm and welcoming. Through the window, I could see Adrian helping Lucas and Noah with homework at the kitchen table. They were 5 now, starting kindergarten, asking a million questions about everything. I sat in the driveway for a moment, just watching my family through the window, remembering the scared, broken woman who'd signed those papers, remembering the hospital bed, the premature babies, the fear that nothing would ever be okay again. But it was okay, more than okay. I walked inside. Lucas ran to me immediately. Mama, I wrote a whole sentence today. Want to see? Of course I want to see. Noah was right behind. Me too. Mine has 7 words. Adrian looked up from where he was chopping vegetables for dinner. How was the conference? Good, exhausting, important. He kissed me. Dinner in 20 minutes. I'll help. We moved around the kitchen in the comfortable choreography of years together. The boys finished their homework and went to play. Adrian told me about his day, a new biotech investment showing promise. I told him about the young pregnant woman, the fear in her eyes I recognized so well. You're changing lives, he said. We're changing lives. Your foundation funds half our programs. That's different. Writing checks is easy. What you do, showing up, telling your story over and over, that takes real courage. After dinner, after baths, after bedtime stories, and tucking in and goodnight kisses, Adrian and I sat on the couch with glasses of wine. I got an email from Jackson's lawyer today, I said. Adrian's hand tightened slightly on his glass. What did it say? Jackson's mother passed away. Early onset Alzheimer's. He was her primary caregiver for the past 2 years. The funeral is next week. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you going to reach out? I thought about it. No, but I'll send flowers, anonymous. Because even after everything, I don't wish him pain. I just wish him distance. That's more grace than most people would offer. Maybe, or maybe I've just learned that holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts him. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Sienna. I know it's been years, but I wanted you to know I'm getting married next month to someone kind, someone who listens. And I thought of you, of how your courage helped me find my own. Thank you for that. I hope you're well. I showed Adrian the text. Are you going to respond? Yeah, I think I will. I typed, congratulations. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth when it mattered. It changed everything. She responded almost immediately with a heart emoji. Later that night, unable to sleep, I went to check on the boys. They were tangled together in Noah's bed, as they often were, finding comfort in each other even in sleep. I remembered the NICU, the fear, the certainty that I couldn't survive this alone, but I had survived. We'd all survived. And more than that, we'd built something beautiful. Not perfect, not without scars, but real, authentic, true. I thought about all the women I'd met through Signed in Tears, all the stories that echoed my own. The divorces signed in tears, the babies born in crisis, the moments of absolute desperation that somehow transformed into strength. We were a community now, survivors who'd become advocates, victims who'd become voices. And every time I told my story, every time I stood in front of a room full of scared women and said, I signed those papers in tears, but I'm not crying anymore. I saw something shift in their eyes. Hope, maybe, or recognition, or just the simple understanding that they weren't alone. Adrian appeared in the doorway. Can't sleep? Just thinking. About? About how 7 years ago I thought my life was ending. And it was, but it was also beginning. He wrapped his arms around me from behind. We stood there watching our son sleep, breathing in sync. I love our life, I whispered. Me too. Even with all the hard parts, all the trauma and fear and difficulty, especially with those parts, they made us who we are. They brought us here. The next morning I woke to chaos. Lucas had lost a shoe. Noah refused to eat anything but toast. Adrian couldn't find his car keys. It was ordinary, messy, perfect. I drove the boys to school, kissed them goodbye, watched them run to their classroom holding hands. Then I drove to the Signed in Tears office. We'd grown from a one-woman operation to a team of 8, with offices in 5 cities. Women who'd survived their own divorces, their own traumas, now helping others do the same. My assistant handed me my schedule. You have 3 client consultations this morning, then the board meeting at 2, and the NBC interview at 4. The NBC interview was for a documentary about coercive control in relationships. They wanted me to tell my story again. I'd said yes, even though it meant reliving painful memories, because somewhere some woman would watch it and recognize herself. And maybe, just maybe, it would give her the courage to leave. Between meetings, I checked my email. One caught my attention immediately. The sender was Grace Walsh, my old high school counselor. Now 72, retired, but still the wisest person I knew. Elena, I saw you speak last month. I sat in the back, didn't want to interrupt, but I wanted you to know how proud I am. You remember what I told you when you aged out of foster care? That you'd thrive? I was right. Look at you now. Not just surviving, but lifting others as you climb. That's the definition of success, sweetheart. Not money or fame or status. Impact. You're changing the world, one scared woman at a time. Never forget that. Love, Miss Walsh. I read it 3 times, crying at my desk. That afternoon, during the NBC interview, they asked the question I'd been asked 100 times before. Do you regret marrying Jackson Pierce? I thought about it, really thought. No, I said finally. I regret how it ended. I regret the pain. But I don't regret the marriage itself, because it taught me what I deserve. It taught me to value my own voice. It taught me that silence isn't safety, it's erasure. And most importantly, it gave me my sons. Not in the traditional sense, since Jackson forfeited his parental rights, but in the biological sense. Those boys exist because of that relationship, and I can't regret their existence. What would you say to women in similar situations right now? Women who feel trapped, powerless, unable to leave. I looked directly at the camera. I'd say, your feelings are valid. Your fear is real, but you are stronger than you know. And you don't have to do this alone. There are resources. There are people who believe you. There are organizations like Signed in Tears that exist solely to help you navigate this impossible situation. And I'd say you deserve to be heard. You deserve a partner who listens. You deserve safety, respect, and love. Don't settle for less, ever. The interviewer nodded. One final question. If you could go back to that night in Jackson's office, knowing everything you know now, would you still sign those papers? I smiled. Absolutely. Because those papers didn't end my story. They started it. The real story. The one where I discovered I was enough, all by myself. The one where I learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. That night back home, I tucked Lucas and Noah into bed. Mama, Lucas asked, why do we have 2 dads but only one is our real dad? It was a question they'd started asking more frequently. Age-appropriate honesty was our policy. Well, you had a biological father who wasn't ready to be a dad, I explained. But then Papa Adrian came into our lives, and he chose to be your dad. He chose to love you, adopt you, raise you. And that choice, that makes him your real dad. Biology is just genetics. Family is love. Noah nodded seriously. So Papa chose us? Every single day. And you chose us? I kissed his forehead. Before you were even born. I chose you when the world told me you were impossible. I chose you every day since. And I'll keep choosing you for the rest of my life. After they fell asleep, I went downstairs. Adrian was in his study working late. The boys asked about Jackson again, I said. He looked up. What did you tell them? The truth, that their biological father wasn't ready, that you chose them. That family is love, not genetics. Good answer. He stood, wrapped his arms around me. I do choose them every day, just like I choose you. Even with all my baggage, all my trauma, all the complicated history, especially with all of that, it's part of who you are, and I love who you are. We stood there holding each other in the quiet house. Outside, the Connecticut night was peaceful. Inside, our life was full. I thought about Jackson sometimes, wondered if he'd found peace in Montana, wondered if he ever thought about the sons he'd never met, wondered if he regretted his choices. But mostly I didn't think about him at all. He was a chapter in my story, but not the whole book. And I'd written so many chapters since then. Chapters filled with love, growth, purpose, and joy. The next week, I received a package at the office. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a note from Sienna. Elena, I'm writing a book about my journey, from complicity to accountability, from image to authenticity. I wanted to include what I learned from watching you navigate your truth with grace. Would you be willing to write the foreword? No pressure if not. Just thought I'd ask. With gratitude, Sienna. I called her that night. We talked for 2 hours about growth, healing, the weight of public perception, the freedom of truth. She was different now. Grounded, real. You know what I admire most about you? She said toward the end of our conversation. You never tried to destroy Jackson. You just told your truth and let the consequences unfold naturally. That takes restraint I didn't have. I thought about revenge, I admitted. A lot, But ultimately, I realized his destruction wasn't my responsibility. My responsibility was to protect my children and tell my truth. Everything else was just natural consequences. That's wisdom. No, that's therapy. We both laughed. A month later, signed in tears, held our annual fundraiser. 500 people attended. Donors, survivors, advocates, celebrities who'd publicly supported our cause. Adrian gave a speech about the importance of supporting women's financial independence during divorce. Sienna spoke about recognizing coercive control. I told my story one more time, and at the end of the night, we'd raised $2.7 million. Enough to expand to 10 more cities, enough to help thousands more women. As I stood on stage looking out at the crowd, I saw Miss Walsh in the third row, beaming with pride. I saw Harper, my attorney who'd become my friend. Dr. Morrison, who delivered my twins and saved their lives. I saw the young pregnant woman from the conference, now holding a healthy baby, smiling with relief. And I saw my family. Burry holding Lucas, who was getting sleepy. Noah waving at me from his seat. This was my life now, not the fairy tale I'd imagined when I married Jackson. Something better, something real, authentic love, purposeful work, messy, beautiful, complicated truth. That night, lying in bed beside Adrian, I thought about the question the NBC interviewer had asked, about regrets. The truth was, I didn't regret the pain anymore, because the pain had transformed me. It had taken the quiet, scared foster kid who believed her job was to be invisible and turned her into a woman who spoke truth to power. It had taken the wife who signed papers in tears and created an advocate who changed laws. It had taken the broken pieces and built something whole. What are you thinking about? Adrian asked sleepily. 23 seconds, I said. What? That's how long it took to sign the divorce papers. 23 seconds to end 6 years of marriage. I counted because I was terrified that if I stopped counting, I'd start screaming. He pulled me closer. And now? Now I'm not counting anymore. I'm not terrified. I'm just living. Finally, after all these years, I'm just living. Good, he whispered. That's all I ever wanted for you. To just live. Free. Full. Yours. Outside, the night was peaceful. Inside, our son slept safely, and I fell asleep with a smile on my face, knowing that tomorrow I'd wake up and do it all again. Tell my story, help other women tell theirs, love my family, build my life. Not the life I'd planned, not the fairy tale, but something infinitely better. The truth, my truth. And that was enough, more than enough. I was enough, we all were.